Okay, let's talk about Fox News' Laura Ingraham. You might recall that Fox News host Laura Ingraham took what sort of seemed like an abrupt vacation after about a dozen of her advertisers stopped buying ads on her show as a result of her comments about David Hogg. David Hogg is a student from the Parkland, Florida high school that suffered a mass shooting a few weeks ago. And David Hogg himself, after Laura Ingraham did this, called for a boycott of her show, an advertiser boycott of her show on Twitter and on a dozen or more, really dozens of companies that were advertising on her program. And before her abrupt vacation, about a dozen of those companies had already bailed. And then she very, very quickly announced that she was taking a week off for Easter. It's possible that that week off was pre-planned and it just wasn't mentioned. It might not have been. The timing of it was pretty weird, but she did return, right? That was part of the question because when Bill O'Reilly ultimately lost his program on Fox News, he took a very sudden week or two off. Was it a week or two? I don't remember. And very quickly thereafter, the show went away. But Laura Ingraham did come back, but not to good news. And in fact, the number of advertisers dropping her show increased from 12 to 20 by the time she was back for her first post-Easter break show on Monday. And that's at least 20 advertisers that have dropped her show that we know about. And the latest one here is Allstate Insurance. The difference seems to be that Allstate is kind of being more subtle. So there are companies that when they decided to drop advertising with Laura Ingraham, they tweeted about it, they put out a press release about it, they made it known that they were pulling ads. And if media reached out to them to say, are you pulling ads? They would say yes. Allstate is taking a bit of a different approach. They've not been answering questions. They were asked to confirm that they pulled ads and they said, we've taken note of your concerns, which isn't an answer at all to the question of are you still answering advertising on the program? They were asked, are more ads scheduled to run on Laura Ingraham's show? And Allstate said, we cannot answer that question. So they might be taking the more subtle approach, which is they're dropping the ads, but they're not making noise about it. Ace Hardware took that approach. Men's clothing store Joseph A. Bank said, listen, we were never actually buying on Laura Ingraham's show. We were buying generally on Fox News. But Joseph A. Bank ads have sort of mysteriously or not so mysteriously disappeared from Laura Ingraham's show as well. And I'm kind of mixed about this, the subtle strategy of pulling the ads. Because on the one hand, I like the idea of just pulling the ads quietly, not making a big hubbub for publicity and just saying, we're just not going to fund the program anymore. But it can also be sort of a calculated thing, right? Because you might say, well, pull the ads. The people that are paying close attention to who's advertising will notice it and they'll reward you. They'll be happy, right? The people who are on the sort of the side of David Hogg. But by subtly pulling the ads without making an actual announcement about it, maybe the people that would boycott you for pulling the ads won't notice because you're not drawing attention to it. In any case, the pulling of the ads is a good thing. And there's still people saying these are limits on free speech. This is a form of censorship. It's just such a bogus perspective and a misunderstanding of what censorship and free speech really are. I was actually talking yesterday about this with Sam Seder, host of The Majority Report. It's good not to fund propaganda. It's good not to fund people who criticize students at high schools that suffered mass shootings, right? It is objectively good. And people will say to me, but David, you could be hurt by that same sword. That's a double-edged sword. If I support the boycotts by advertisers of other programs to the point that those programs could go out of business, I also could be the target of the same type of advertiser boycott. Listen, if I say something that is so upsetting to people and so disturbing and so horrible that my audience activates or people not in my audience and go to advertisers and say, look at what David said, pull your money. If I'm saying despicable things, then the case can be made that I deserve to be boycotted and that my speech has consequences. And my speech having consequences is not the same as some kind of blanket censorship or restriction on free speech. And people will remind me of YouTube's Adpocalypse. That was not a targeted boycott of me for the things I said. It was horrible, and I am completely against what happened, and everybody knows the extent to which it hurt the program during 2017. But that was something that happened across news and politics. It happened to conservatives and liberals, and it was about advertisers becoming sort of skittish about having their ads appear on edgy content or controversial content. That is completely different than me saying something and then that speech having consequences. And advertisers are free to make the choice about where to support me, whether to support me or not. We have a good relationship with the advertisers that we have. And who would I be to say you can't decide on the basis of my content whether or not to keep advertising? So good luck convincing it to the fans of Laura Ingraham. This has nothing to do with censorship. This has nothing to do with free speech. This has to do with companies with a profit motive making decisions using whatever barometer they have, whatever rubric they have to decide where do we advertise and where don't we advertise. And I'm glad that 20 or more advertisers are saying we're not going to advertise with Laura Ingraham anymore. Give us a like on Facebook, facebook.com/David Pakman Show. We will take a quick break and be back with more after this.